Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Sue Anstiss, MBE, is the founder of Fearless Women, a company with a powerful ambition to drive positive change for women's sport. She has enjoyed a highly successful sports marketing and PR career spanning 30 years, delivering highly successful campaigns, encouraging more women and girls to take part in physical activity. That tireless commitment saw her awarded the MBE in 2018 for services to grassroots and women's sport. A founding trustee of the Women's Sports Trust, she is the host of the highly successful podcast The Game Changers, now in its 5th series featuring high-profile athletes and some of the most influential women in global sport. 2021 sees the launch of Sue's book Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. What's the story behind it all? Without further ado, let's get into it. Sue Anstiss, welcome to the Extrology podcast. Great to have you on as a guest. And as I'd earlier referenced, an element of poacher turned gamekeeper as podcast host turns to interviewee. But without further ado, let's dive into things. So when do you first remember sport becoming such a big part of your life?
I think it was probably always quite a part of my life. My dad was a PT instructor in the Metropolitan Police, so he was a very man into sport and fitness. I remember him, my mum saying to him, they're not your recruits, when he came home to encourage us all to take part in sport and physical activity. So I think we just have a very sporty family. So watching sport, playing sport. I've got 3 older brothers, or a twin brother and 2 older brothers. So I think sport was just always very much the norm, the go-to within our lives, really.
And did you any particular sports that stand out?
For me, I swam. So I was quite late to learn to swim. I guess that's the irony as well, as my dad used to teach people to swim for work, and then he didn't really teach us. He probably couldn't be quite as motivated to teach us to swim, but we were quite late learning to swim. But then that's my sport that I really got into. So 10 or 11, and then went on to swim county and national championships and stuff. So so swimming initially, and then into athletics. So
athletics was you went from the pool onto the track.
Yes, yeah. And my middle brother, Tim, so he was a decathlete, a really good decathlete, international pole vaulter. So he was a proper athlete, really. So, he loved his athletics. And so I think I followed him down to Feltham Athletics Club, as it was at the time, to take part in athletics. So middle distance to begin with, and then 4 hurdles was my event eventually. So, I love that. I love that kind of camaraderie of being at the track and being with friends. I loved that side of sport too. So, for me, it was athletics.
So I always thought that and I'm talking in a very much, kind of school sports day sense, but I always felt that 400 meters was the worst possible distance, because it was, it's not, clearly 800 is quick, but it's not a sprint. 400 has still got that sprint feel. Throwing hurdles into that, goodness, that's, you have my admiration. So what about in terms of watching sport? Were there any particular sports teams? Did you spend your Saturdays, on a terrace somewhere or anything of that sort of nature?
Yeah, we didn't really watch as a family. We didn't watch live sport really as a family. The television was always on with sport on television. So that was within the house. I think my dad would watch anything on television. So I think watching probably television sport rather than anything as spectators. And interestingly, I guess as a family, he was a Chelsea fan, but rugby was probably a sport that we watched more of. So I think I've kind of grew up not really following football particularly, but probably more rugby as a family to watch.
And in terms of those, those sort of childhood heroes, posters on the wall, that sort of thing, who were those that you looked up to and inspired to emulate?
Yeah, I guess it's funny, isn't it? It's a question I ask my guests a lot on the Game Changers podcast, and you ask it back to me. I guess it was probably around the Olympic time, so almost the Olga Corbett's on to those early days. Give my age away there, aren't I? In terms of those early days of the Olympic Games, and then probably the women that you saw, around on the tennis court around Wimbledon, or say around Olympic Games and athletics. It was probably because obviously there wasn't much women's team sport to watch at all. So probably those individual athletes, really.
No, I met somebody had asked me only a couple of days ago as to the first Olympics that I remembered. And the first one I really remember watching actually would have been the 1980 Olympics in Moscow with Alan Wells. That was the race that had stood out. But I think that when we look at where we are in life today and the amount of sport that we can consume through a multitude of channels, to your point, live sport, and in particular women's sport, I mean, it just, unless you had those big events, it just didn't feature in quite such the same way, did it? So
no, not at all.
So in terms of, I guess, the parallels between business and sport, of which I think there are many, and what is it that what are the lessons, if you like, that you've taken from sport into business?
Again, do I directly think about what I have taken from sport? I think it probably made me a confident person. I think confident being part of a team, working with others, those things that you hear about, don't you? There's some really interesting stats, I think, from Ernst & Young around, they looked at all the women in sort of C-suite senior roles in the States, and about 90% of them had played team sport at some time or another. So that, although I don't directly sit and think, actually, it's sport that gave me X, Y, and Z, I'm sure that confidence, wanting to work with other people, happy to fail at things and try again, I'm sure lots of those elements has come from being part of sport.
So take us on the journey from Quaker and Cadbury. You've enjoyed a fabulous career in sports marketing and PR and running your own business. But what was the story? Take us on that journey.
So I did study PE and English at Loughborough University. It was my degree of choice. I think my brothers at the time mocked me that I was studying books and games at university, which was not very vocational. That has turned out to be, as I've then gone on to write about and talk about sport. So I wanted to work in sports sponsorship. Actually, that was my passion. When I first went to Loughborough, I wanted to be a PE teacher. People taught me out of that. But I wanted to work in sports sponsorship. And then I can't ever remember even who gave me the advice, but someone said, you're better off to go and get some experience in a blue chip company on a sales marketing background before you then move into sports sponsorship and marketing. So I went to work in Cadbury's. I was the sales graduate that year for Cadbury's. I was there a couple of years. And then actually the guy I was sat next to was headhunted for the job with Gatorade, the sports drink sponsorship role. And he wasn't about to leave. Hugh Bunn, I still have some contact with him now. And he said, you should talk to the girl that sat next to me because she's really passionate about sport. She went to Loughborough. And so, by default, anyway, I went for the interview and I got offered the job working in sports marketing for Gatorade. They're about to launch into the UK. As it happened, I was there for a couple of years. They never launched in the end in the UK, various reasons, and they went into different markets. So I did all the work, pre-prep work with sports teams and clubs to build their reputation, the authenticity and the credibility of the brand. And then again, they didn't launch in the UK. So actually I was made redundant at 26, which was a bit of a shock at the time. My dream job, really, traveling to all these different countries, working with sports brands and clubs. And then I worked for a little while for an agency in London and then Y&R. And then I set up on my own. So my back bedroom in Heston, I set up the agency, and I took Gatorade then became my first client. So although they weren't doing stuff in the UK, they were doing a lot in Europe. So they were one of my first clients, and I did some stuff for 220 magazine to find some sponsorship for their triathlons and began to do a bit of work in that space. So sports sponsorship was really how I established the agency initially. That's what I thought we would be, a sports sponsorship agency.
What was the inspiration? Was there that sort of eureka moment you thought, you know what, I'm gonna do this on my own? What was it that inspired you to go down that road?
Yeah, I wish it was as romantic as that. I think it was more that almost like, what did I have to lose? Actually, what happened was I was working for a lovely company, part of Y&R, Young and Rubicon, the advertising agency, in their sports sponsorship division, so MDI, and a lovely guy there, my boss at the time, Paul Narroway. I was working for Gatorade, and they were working for Coca-Cola and Powerade, and there was a conflict of interest. So the Gatorade came back to me and said, would you like some of this business? And I couldn't do it while I was still working at the agency with him. So I thought, I could just set up and do it on my own. And here, to give him massive credit, and I still do 20 whatever years later, he set me off on my way. I just bought Bupa in to sponsor a triathlon down in Bath. And he said, he let me take that business with me to set up on my own, which was so generous when I look back in retrospect that it was business I brought into the agency, but he let me take it to set up on my own. So I had Bupa as a client, I had Gatorade, and the triathlon work. So I think I did it, and I thought, actually, what did I have to lose? If it didn't work out, I said to everybody, I'll go and get a job. If it didn't work out, I could go and find a role somewhere else. So I think sort of I had a house with some lodges in it. It wasn't like I had a family. I didn't have massive dependency on me in terms of income. So I didn't feel particularly brave. It just felt like, I'll give this a go and see how it works out, really.
Which is, I'm sure there are many who have contemplated that. Do I go out on my own? Do I make the break? Do I go for it? And clearly some do. Clearly some don't. Can you remember looking back that first day, if you like, where, as you say, in that back bedroom, you think, right, okay, it's all me. Here we go. How did you feel?
So excited, and I can still remember, because I remember thinking it was like when you're a child and you probably didn't do this, but you played shops with that whole little paper bags and sweets and weighing things out. I felt like that, but in my office, because I had a fax. This is how long it is ago, isn't it? My fax machine, my Rolodex, my phone. Almost like having all those things didn't quite feel real, and I was set up with my cork board and all those things ready to go, new little logo, business cards. So it did feel a little bit like make believe, but like playing almost in the setup of that office. So very exciting. And I remember, so I say Bupa was one of our clients to begin with. We brought them in to work with the Fitness Industry Association at the time, which is now UK Active. So they came on board as a sponsor of the Commit to Get Fit campaign. And I used to go to meetings with Bupa, and I was trying to be so efficient. So by the time I got home, I would do the contact report and have it with them by the end of that evening, not even the next day. I so wanted to prove that I was super professional, that I never wanted anyone to say, oh, it's that girl that works in a back bedroom in Heston. Obviously they had other big agencies that were doing other work for them. And I was kind of desperate just to show that I could be as professional. So I kind of over-exceeded, I think, in terms of that professionalism and wanting to prove to them, which is probably something that stayed with the agency. My team probably regret that over time, that need to make sure everything's absolutely kind of perfect and of a really high standard.
What were some of the initial challenges that you faced from the outset?
I guess a bit of its own confidence. Probably I sound like I'm really confident in what I went and did, but I think actually you don't have that confidence that you can do things. But then I look back now, and I guess running the agency and then employing people who are in their 20s, and you not write them and cop more, but you worry about what they're capable of doing and can they. And actually, that's exactly what I was doing at the time. You just went off and did it, and you learn along the way, really. So I guess I always felt it was a bit of a battle against those big agencies with big budgets and better software systems, and more of a history of experience there. But as we proved over time, you do a really good job, and it's about relationships, and you're trusted and you work hard, then actually it is possible to prove yourself in that way. And there will always be clients that would only go for the big name agencies because that's what they need to be seen to be doing. But clearly over time we proved ourselves in that way.
What do you think you learned about yourself through the experience?
For the whole experience of the agency,
certainly from those early days, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it probably did build that whole confidence of just give it a go and what have you got to lose? I think I worked bloody hard. I do remember like friends would call on a Saturday night and say, would you want to come out with us? Because we knew you'd be in on a Saturday night, because I, just used to work all day, all evening, all the way through, because I was so passionate about it. It was my kind of baby. So I think I recognised, that I could certainly work hard and put my mind to it when it was my own thing.
And in terms of the nature of sports sponsorship in those days, I mean, perhaps not a space in which I've worked, but my perception would be that if I look at the way that the sports sponsorship has matured, if you like, over the last 30 years, I mean, it's all pervasive now. It's everywhere. Brand is everything. But my sense would be it would have been a relatively immature market at that point. I mean, I read Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's book, and I love that sense of kind of going around, the Olympics and getting athletes to wear your shoes on the track and all that sort of good thing. But it clearly was an advance beyond that. But the industry must have changed immeasurably through your tenure.
And that's almost when I moved away from it. So I guess those early days, I think when getting Bupa on board to sponsor the Bath Triathlon, I found when we cleared out the office recently, I've still got it, I've kept it, but the deck that I sent to them with my cut out pictures from Triathlon magazines stuck in to, that's and photocopied, colour photocopied and sent out to people. That's almost, you forget that's how we pitch for business. But a bit of a scattergun approach out to lots of different people, and then people, it landed on their desk, they liked it, they came on board. So clearly, completely different way of selling working sponsorship now. And I think when in the early years, it was fabulous. If you were able to sell a sponsorship, then you got a lovely commission, 20%. That's great. That's set you up for the next few months or so. And what happened and where we evolved is more clients wanted us to provide more PR support or more comms support. I was quite adamant that we weren't ever going to be a PR agency. I had this negative perception of, girls in black and lilies in reception, marble floors and all that. We weren't that. We were sports, sponsorship and promotion. But I soon realised that actually having a regular income of a monthly retainer or someone paying you to raise profile and activate the properties and to talk about them right over was a much better business model in a way than just hoping that you would get a commission because you'd sell a fantastic piece of business. So I think that's where we changed almost, was having other employees and recognising actually getting regular retainers in. That's kind of the way to go, really, to build the business rather than hoping on commission. And I think also, as you say, the market's changed, and the likes of Synergy and Essentially and other, all those other businesses. Karen Earl was around at the time. Actually, I interviewed with her way back when I was looking for that first job. But I think that sophistication of sports sponsorship and the massive growth and, so much more about relationships and who you know, that we were like such a tiny little element within that massive field, that it seemed better to move in to more the PR side. And actually what we then did is we moved into the fitness sector. So through the work with the Fitness Industry Association, I used to attend their board meetings, and then I got to meet the guys that headed Fitness First and Life Fitness and TRX and all those people that work within the fitness sector, the gym chains and so on. And that's where our business then grew, because at 1992, 94, that was a time of rapid growth for the fitness sector. So we were sort of in that sector at a time when it was, growing very fast.
Can you remember what was it that triggered your first employee at the point at which you think, actually, I need this is going great, but actually I'm going to need some help? That's a bold step to have to first make. Can you remember, talk us through that?
Yeah, it's my lovely sister-in-law, actually. Well, she is my sister-in-law now. She wasn't at the time. Anstiss, Karen Ray, she was. So, I think it was probably just the volume of work and activity and running events for Gay Trade out in Europe. And I think, just got really busy really quickly working from home. And so she came on board to help with time there. And then Jasmine came on board. And so eventually then we moved out of the house because we couldn't all fit in. And we moved downstairs, and then we moved out and got our first offices about 5 years into the agency being established. So, just the demand, I guess, as work grew and we needed more support.
It's interesting, I think, if you look at where we'd found ourselves in the last 6 months, and actually in particular last night's announcement, very timely, around kind of, do we go back to working from home? Technology today makes working from home relatively straightforward, depending, of course, on what it is that you might do. But in terms of that sort of office type of role, you can do that from the home. But the technology, if we go back, the fax machine still clearly has a place, if only because I understand that Leo Messi faxed his potential leaving from Barcelona to the offices. But, what was it like if you compare it to the way that technology is today?
I know, and I think it's very funny, isn't it? I think my team used to get bored of that. Oh my God, she's going on about that whole. But actually, Karen and I sitting opposite a desk, passing a Rolodex, and I still have the Rolodex. I kept that for a sort of an antiquated thing to keep. But passing a Rolodex to find a number to call somebody, there was no internet. We weren't on the internet. We were writing letters and printing them out, sending out images in little transparencies wrapped in bubble wrap to send out photographs to the media, press releases, with a franking machine and getting them out every day. It just feels so weird to think how different that was. But it was very, I guess that, as you say, very physical. There's no way you could have worked in different places. Well, you could have done, but you'd have had almost two completely separate offices to have functioned in that way. So it was so very different.
I think it's that realization actually that you can just do so much with a phone. And I think that's the beauty that oftentimes can get forgotten, that we live in a world where methods of communication are so vast. Actually, you can't beat good old-fashioned conversation, and you can do so much with a phone. But fascinating. So in terms of, what do you think are the key lessons that you've learned along the way from running your own business?
I guess I talk a lot now. I'm talking to, mentoring and supporting younger people coming through into business. And I think probably about being brave is something that seems to come up a lot. So I think that whole being confident to try new things and to know that you are as good as the next person there is probably something that I think was something I've learned across time. So kind of having the confidence. I think there were probably things I didn't step forward for, or I didn't put myself forward for, because I was worried about what other people could do or what people's perception would be. So I think definitely that's something that I've learned. I think I learned around surrounding yourself with great people is definitely something that has been, I kind of heard a few times, and then witnessing that yourself. Actually, it's not about, for a long time, I think I appointed people who were almost little mini me's in my image, many young women, fantastic young women, and many of whom had some of even done the same degree as me at Loughborough, come from university, etc. So knowing, they'll do a good job because they are very similar to me, and actually recognising what I need is skill that's completely different from mine. I need people with, to be much better than me at certain things and to come from different backgrounds. I guess we talk a lot now, don't we, about diversity, and I now see completely that actually we probably weren't in those early days. We were all very much of a similar mould, and actually in the last latter years of Promote, as we got more men involved and people from different backgrounds, actually that's where we were probably at our best. So I think surrounding yourself by good, investing in good people and trying to retain them, it's probably a big lesson there.
I think it's a really interesting point that you raise with respect to diversity, because I think that so much of the diversity agenda should not just solely be about, when it comes to recruitment anyway, solely about, say, ethnicity or gender, or any of those sorts of clearly very important issues, but also about experience. Actually about the experiences, not only in terms of upbringing, but actually almost work experiences as well, because there are so many challenges through running a business these days. Actually, you need that kind of breadth of understanding gained from other spaces, other places, other experiences that can be a huge asset for your business.
Absolutely, yeah,
absolutely. So in terms of the story behind the Women's Sports Trust, you were one of the founding trustees of the Women's Sports Trust. What's the story? Where did the inspiration come from? How did it come about?
Yeah, so Tammy Parler and Joe Bostock are the founders of the Women's Sport Trust, and I think it was post London 2012 really. So I think Tammy's a black belt martial artist, and I think she'd wandered around London and seen all these amazing women on posters and all this fabulous coverage of women's sport, and then soon after it kind of fell away, and I think it was almost her realisation of where's it all gone. It was like amazing during London 2012. So they established the Women's Sport Trust as a charity to try with a kind of really key goals of raising the profile of women's sport, getting more funding into women's sport, increasing role models and the presence of role models. And actually, it's interesting, Kate Richardson-Walsh, the England hockey captain, GB hockey captain, who eventually went on to win gold, leading to gold in Rio, she was working with us. So through the EIS Lifestyles program, she had come to Promote, and she was, I guess, just testing the waters to see if she wanted to work in PR and comms post her retirement to come. And she was contacted by the Women's Sport Trust, who said, would she be interested in coming out and having a conversation about being a patron? And I looked at their website and said, oh my God, Kate looks amazing. Can I come with you to the meeting? So I went along with her, and they said, oh, it will be brilliant. Come along and be a trustee. So it was just one of those things where I kind of invited myself along, but actually it all fell into place. And I was just so aligned to what they were trying to achieve, was absolutely where my head was too. So yeah, I've been a founding trustee. I've been a trustee for them since 2013 when the charity was first established, and has gone on to do some really amazing things, had lots of great impact in terms of, and at a time when women's sport has been changing so much in terms of profile and funding and increasing the profile of those role models as well.
So you go back to, it was interesting, your point there about 2012. As I reflect back, I remember we were all kind of caught on the crest of a London 2012 wave, weren't we, here in the UK, where it seemed like it was a phenomenal event. We did a fabulous job. I think we put on a great Olympics, but I think as you referenced there, there was a big sort of upswell of support and recognition of women's sport through the 2012 Olympics that I think you just made that point that seemed to sort of fall away a little bit. Why do you think that was?
I think it's always the way for major events. I mean, interestingly, London 2012 was the first time that women took part in every event at the Games. That's the first time, which is kind of extraordinary to think that it took until 2012 for that to happen. But we do really well with major events in terms of female coverage, so Olympics, World Championships, the World Cup last year for football, etc. But it's the ongoing regular coverage where women fall down at the moment. So we don't get that coverage for the Premier 15s rugby, or in the past for the Barclays FA WSL, there hasn't been that continued coverage week by week by week. So great that these massive events come, and Wimbledon obviously every, usually in June, July, but fantastic coverage for those amazing female athletes, or around the US Open, etc. But then week to week, it falls back to rugby, cricket, football, etc. The male leagues that are so well established that then take over the mainstay of that coverage. So that's really what's exciting, I think, now, COVID aside, is what's happening with sponsorship pouring into the FAWSL and Vitality last week announcing their sponsorship of the Women's FA Cup and beginning to raise that profile, and then to get those spectators and to get that coverage for women's sport on a more regular basis. So it won't be a month after a major games. I mean, if you look at last summer 2019 rather, we had the Women's World Cup in France. We had the Netball World Cup that followed. There was a Sondheim Cup. There was Wimbledon. There was like a massive summer of women's sport, and it was brilliant. And there were times when BBC's coverage was like half and half in terms of the regular coverage on their website and the app, etc., which was all brilliant. And then you kind of get to October, November, and it didn't fall off a cliff because it's definitely better than it's ever been before. So it's gradually moving up, but it goes back to more or less a level of where it was before. And that's what we're looking to change, is almost to have that consistency with the, with the netball, with the Vitality, Super League, etc., making sure that is covered on a regular basis rather than it just being the heights of those amazing championships. We do championships and world championships really well. It's just trying to make it more consistent. That was a long answer to a short question.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think we do go through? I mean, because I'm reflecting back on last summer and watching. I'm a huge football fan. I love all sports, but I'm a huge football fan, and I remember watching England women in the World Cup. And as I recall, I couldn't remember the specifics, but the viewer figures for the
11.7 million.
Is that what it was? Goodness me! So I knew it was very. So there's clearly an appetite to consume. Why do you think it is, therefore, that there is these peaks and troughs to which you refer?
Yeah, many reasons. Many reasons. A lot around media coverage and around who runs the media and who feels it's newsworthy or not. So there's a bit of the gatekeepers of those that feel actually men read paper. Men are reading the sports pages, so let's put more male sport in there. People like that kind of myth that people are interested in women's sport. So there's a bit around that. And I guess a lot of the individual sports do get good coverage still. The women's individual sports is the team sports, where we're almost playing catch up from 150 years ago when men's sport was for men by men. So in cricket and football and rugby, it is still that we're kind of a bit behind. We're way behind in terms of investments and crowd sizes. And it's such a circle of those female athletes, therefore, don't get the sponsorship because they haven't got the exposure, so they're not getting paid to pay professionally. So the quality of the game hasn't been as good because they haven't been professional athletes. They're training twice a week, so how can you expect them to be playing to the level of men's sport? But that is, it's all changing. The fact that in the last 5 years or so, they've all become professional at that highest level of cricket and netball and rugby. So and football. So we're beginning to see that really high quality of play, and that's what people saw at the World Cup, is to see there's that amazing. People weren't just watching it because it was England. It was amazing football, and it's still those same players that will be in the FAWSL, especially now half of the US soccer team are coming across to play in the FAWSL as well. So hopefully it's how we can maintain those crowds and that interest in women's sport beyond the major championships. That's the kind of challenge that we're facing.
So who does women's sport? Oh, and that's a broad sweeping statement. I was going to say, who does women's sport well from a country perspective? I think if I reflect on the US, for example, you mentioned the influx of women's professional soccer players coming into the UK. The women's US, I slightly hesitate when I say soccer. Having grown up a football fan, I have an aversion to that particular phrase. But if I look at the US women's soccer team and the success that they've enjoyed historically, particularly I think they've got the highest number of World Cup wins of any nation. Is there a particular nation that we perhaps could look to aspire to achieve what they achieve in terms of the promotion of the women's game or the women's sport generally?
Yeah. And it's different in different sports in different countries. Really interesting, though. So I guess the success of US women's soccer is a lot of that is through Title IX. So back in 1972, the kind of legal decision to ensure that everybody in all education, whatever funding went into, equally for boys and girls across all education. So within, how massive college sport is in the States, so actually all that money that was invested in male sport then had to be equally invested in female sport, and a massive backlash, and it went on in the courts for many years. Anyway, eventually it has happened. So now all those fantastic opportunities for women to have scholarships and play soccer at US universities is what has driven the success that feeds right through to the success of the US team. So massive, massive participation level. So from a soccer point of view, I think that equality right at the grassroots all the way through has made a massive difference in the States. If you look at Australia and New Zealand on the netball side, they very early professionalised leagues and so on. I was very lucky to be over in Sydney last January and went to see where the Swifts and the Giants were playing, and met some people, and just to walk around town and see these massive posters with Joe Hart and Helen Housby on the side of buses, and really promoting, and it's on live public television on a very regular basis. So they've kind of got netball, really, they're doing very well. And obviously that's why lots of our England Roses went out to have played in New Zealand and Australia, and in a way that's kind of what helped us win the Commonwealth Games, I think, because they had realised actually that these are just girls like us and they had a chance to play at such a high level. So they're doing that really well. So I guess there are different countries and areas doing different elements of women's sport better, because I think the US soccer, great participation, but the fact is they're still fighting for equal pay, and the crowds haven't been massive when they've come back out of World Cup in terms of supporting them on a day-to-day basis. It's probably the WNBA in the States that has done better, perhaps, in terms of its audience and its funding and sponsorship and the profile of players too. So, different countries and different sports doing well that we can look across at.
Interesting that it should have taken that government intervention at a legislative, if I could say it, level to.
I didn't try to say it. That's why.
To encourage that, that investment to come in. Is that something? You have to forgive my ignorance, but is that something that we're doing in a similar way here in the UK? Is there still that discrepancy of investment between male and female at a very young age?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it's probably not as dramatic as it was in the States, because so much of their sport is funded through college sport. So my brother was he spent some time actually in North Carolina at university out there. When you then, or Virginia rather, you look at the 60, 70,000 fans coming in to watch a game at the weekend, and I would be at Loughborough going, oh, there was 150 people, watching the boys play rugby. So it's a big crowd, and there's just vastness of people going to watch college sport. So I think it's on such a different level in terms of the money and funding that goes into college sport there. But I do think, I question that too, actually. If you look at universities, they're getting better, definitely. But if you talk to Bucks and other universities, is it equal investment in male and female sport? And it's not just about the investment in it. Do they get the same coaches? Have they got the same access to pitches? Do they get the same S&C? Do they get the same opportunities to play? And I think it's getting better, because universities are saying, young women won't stand for it to have a less opportunity. But that probably hasn't been equal. And if you look at, as I have done in the past, across some of the websites and stuff, it's quite male focused in terms of sport. And then you would bring that down to, what's it like at colleges, at FE colleges? What's it like in schools? So probably not to the disparity isn't as massive as it is in the States, but it's definitely still there, and something that is, beginning to be called out and needs changing.
Do you think the advances in grassroots, if I look at my own experience, I'm one of three, the eldest of three, and my sister's 5 years younger. She's the youngest. My brother and I only about 18 months apart. We grew up absolute football nuts. And my poor sister used to get dragged by my parents every Sunday in one direction or another, where my brother and I would go and play for our respective teams. And I think suddenly, I know she got to a point where it's kind of, well, if I can't beat them, I want to join them. Now, admittedly, this is in the early 1980s, and she ended up playing for my local for the team that my brother and I played for, club that my brother and I played for, up until the age of 10, and was then told, it's now no longer friendlies, it's now organised leagues, you can't play anymore. And there wasn't a girls' team she could go to go and continue playing football. She ended up doing athletics. But if I look at now, if I go to my local park on a Sunday morning, there are boys and girls teams, across a field, hundreds and hundreds of kids playing, which is fabulous to see. Is there that investment in grassroots? It strikes me that's come a long way. It's still got a long way to go, but do you see that happening from your own experiences?
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive difference. And I think the work the FA are doing with the Wildcat clubs and work in school, young schools, there's a goal to get by 2024 to have girls having equal access to through their school sport partnerships. So they've got equal access to football in schools as boys have. And similarly, 25% of those playing rugby now are women. Worldwide, the fastest growing area of rugby, it's not coming from the boys, it's coming from the girls and the women. And that's why, World Rugby and others, are beginning to take it very seriously and need to take it very seriously, because actually that's where the growth's coming from, because it's this whole market that hasn't been tapped into before, either as players or fans. And then through that, they become officials and spectators, and, it's bringing in half the population, really. So, yeah, definitely seeing massive growth, and cricket too, reaching out into schools and communities and so on. So I say we almost feel like we're playing catch up from about 100 years ago, when all those teams and leagues were formed, and it was very much the kind of men that established that. It is definitely changing. Is it changing fast enough? I'm not sure it is, but it is changing, and there's a bit of a groundswell to get more women and girls. And I feel that. I talked to lots of the players I talked to on the podcast, in the football podcast. I think, as you say, they were mocked for playing football, or they were insulted, or they were thrown off of the teams. And how hard did they have to fight to be able to find success? So at least now you're seeing young girls coming into the England team who have had a chance to play from when they were very young, becoming more of a natural thing that they're able to play and have access to play. But yeah, for many, many decades, women didn't have that at all.
That leads us very nicely, albeit clearly I'm not trying to take any credit for what seems like now a seamless link into your award of the MBE, but obviously your contribution to grassroots and indeed to women's sport resulted in you being awarded the MBE in 2018. Is that right?
Yes.
Which is a fabulous accolade. Congratulations. And indeed, you're the first guest I've had on the podcast who's been awarded an MBE, so I'm an exalted company. But how must that have felt? I mean, tell me about the experience first and foremost. The day going to Buckingham Palace, all those it must have been a terrific experience.
Yeah, it was lovely, really lovely, and lovely to share it with my daughters to be there with me, and my husband too. So actually, don't take credit, but actually, so much of what I've done is because of my husband's support. And he's, I've got 3 daughters. He stopped working when we had our 3rd daughter, and has been at home with them as a sort of home dad and a supporter. So I think sometimes it's easy to take credit for the things I've done, but actually it's the other people around you that have enabled that too. And he's very much a part of my success there. So it was lovely that he was then able to, be there and share in that award too. But yeah, really, it was a really exciting thing and lovely. And I think I remember when it's announced on New Year's Eve, and we kind of know because you're told about it a month before you get a letter. I was going to say,
what's the experience? How do you find out? So a letter arrives in the post, and that's how you get that first.
Get a letter. Yeah, from HMRC or something. And my husband called me. I was at work and said, "You've got this thing. You're either going to prison or it's something really positive." I'm not sure why you got a letter from the Queen's office. So you get a letter in November, but they tell you must not tell anyone. And I guess that's more for celebrities and so on. They like to keep it quiet. And then on the list is published on it's New Year's Eve, or it's the Saturday before New Year's Eve, about 10 o'clock at night. So when that happened, that was just amazing. And then I think it's just that outpouring of love and support and all that. So for people that I haven't seen in forever, that was just lovely, really, to realise how much it meant to other people as well, who've been part of that journey with me across those 30 years at different times. So that's very lovely. And then you get your date to go to the palace. We were meant to go to Windsor Castle, actually, but we live in Windsor. And for me, and I love the castle, but it felt a bit like I can get in there with my Advantage card. Actually, Buckingham Palace felt like the proper place to do it if we were going to do it, really. So they were very lovely, and they let us change to go and do it at Buckingham Palace. So yeah, very lovely, very special day.
So are you able to share the actual day itself? What do you go through? What's the experience like?
Quite a lot of hanging around. No, it was very lovely. There was lots of queuing and waiting. And so you go in with your family, and then they're taken off into a different area to sit. And then you go up into a green room where there's no alcohol, orange juice and water, and you chat. And then a lovely man comes out and teaches you, shows you what you're going to need to do to bow, curtsy, whatever, talks through the formality. It's quite interesting, actually. So it does turn out, if I'd have been at Windsor, it would have been the Queen that made the award. But you don't know that beforehand. So you get them. They don't tell you who's going to be doing it, because everybody really wants the Queen. So they won't tell you who it is because they know that people might then try and change the date that they're going. So as it happens, I now realise it's the Queen. She mainly does Windsor. She doesn't go anywhere else anymore. But at Buckingham Palace, so you get there in the morning and you don't know who it's going to be. Is it going to be the Queen? Will it be Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince William? And then when he comes in and says, "Oh, and today is the Prince of Wales," you could almost feel the room go, "Oh." People are like, "Oh, okay, it's not the Queen." So, but it was lovely, and he was very lovely. So you taking in little batches of people you queue to go around. They put a pin on you so that he can just pin it on to you, the medal, when you get there. So clearly very practiced. They're doing it every day for weeks and weeks and weeks, aren't they? Lots of people coming through, but it isn't made to feel like you're on a treadmill almost. It's beautifully done. And very special. But he chatted quite a lot. So I
was going to say, did he have any particular words for you? Any particular questions? We
talked about women's sport. We talked about coaching. I said I'd been working with Coach Call, which is both sons were involved with at the time, their charity, sort of foundation. We spoke about that. So no, it was quite chatty. On the video after, I think at the end I shake his hands with two hands, and my family mocked me. So I was much too over familiar with him. I should have been more respectful, but I was all relaxed because he was very chatty and lovely. Yeah. So very, very special.
What a fabulous experience. Many congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what inspired me, goodness me, what inspired you, I should say, to launch your own podcast? The Game Changers is on series 5.
Yeah.
I think I'm right. What, again, in terms of the inspiration, where did the idea come from?
I think I was just beginning to listen to more podcasts. So it's a year and a half or so ago now. And I was in the office, and I think at the time I thought it would be more of a business to business, more of sharing the stories of women that had done great things in sport. I was conscious that there were some extraordinary women that had great achievements, and perhaps we weren't telling their stories, or people weren't aware of what they had done. So it's just started out, and I guess it was good for the agency to raise our profile and to be seen to be doing something. I felt it was something I'd like to try. So I did look originally. Actually, it was when I went out to Australia, as I mentioned, that going out there, the first interview I did was with Joe Harton. It wasn't very good. It never made it off the cutting room floor to be launched as a podcast. But so I thought I would do it myself, and I looked at doing it through Audacity. Thought I'd teach myself. Husband bought me a lovely big microphone for Christmas, and then I realised actually I loved the talking to people and finding the guests and what have you, but the tech bit wasn't really my bag. So I went off and found a fabulous woman, Sam Walker, who produces them for me. She's ex-Radio 5 Live. So she does all the editing and all the rest of it. And actually that's the bit that made the massive difference, was working with her, because whilst I say I had the inspiration and the ideas and I knew who I wanted to talk to, what I wanted to ask, actually she helped me to craft and shape the interviews, and then she takes them afterwards and makes them sound magnificent in terms of overlay the music and just cutting out all the times I say I guess or and ah. So she's worked really hard. I think actually just that investing at the time in the product to make it really high quality is the bit that then really helped the success. It was always going to be good because they were great guests, but actually I think I have learned there are many companies out there making good content, great podcasts, but actually if they're not well produced and they're not well then publicized, etc., you can just almost like talking to an empty room, aren't you? So that's kind of what made the difference. So so the first 2 series we funded as an agency ourselves, and you'll know from your side it's not cheap to do it well. I think it's cheap. Anyone can just do an interview and stick it up on a different platform, but I think to do it well does take some investment. And I think we did the first 2 ourselves, and then my lovely team said you can't do another one because it's costing too much money and taking too much time, and I was loving it too much, clearly. And so then I went out and looked for partners, and that's where we're very lucky that Barclays have come on board and sponsored 2 based on women in football, so Fearless Women in Football, which have been amazing. And then we've just announced that Sport England is sponsoring this lovely series now. So we've got their backing too. So that's exciting because it enables us to take it to a bigger audience, as well as just to keep going with it and keep investing in it.
So what have you enjoyed about it?
I love everything about it, really. So it is lovely. It's just lovely to talk to people. I think I almost didn't realise that when I started it, but actually to sit down and have an hour's conversation with someone where you can genuinely ask things you're interested in and you can explore things. So I've learned so much from talking to those people. And I've loved learning. I've loved learning the process of what makes a good question and improving my process of, the actual interviewing, etc. So the learning's been lovely, and then that access, and I guess it's that building. You have one or two fantastic guests who take you to the next thing. I was mentioned to you before. They said nice. I spoke to Jess Ennishill yesterday, so it's almost like the ultimate. I've been trying to get her from series one, but it's almost like you get a couple of fantastic guests that then lead you to others. So I think that's been really interesting. Is almost like how you get people to come on board with it, and what you get them to share. Trying not to be too controversial. I've tried to create content that's, I now know the term evergreen, but so that it is quite topical for now, but it isn't too newsworthy. So actually, if someone listens back to one of the episodes with a Claire Balding or Kate Richardson Walsh from the first series, it's still very interesting and relevant now, albeit that it's not too newsworthy. I try, you can't help but allude to COVID now, can you? But try not to make it too timely. But no, I've absolutely loved the process of learning. I think I like learning things anyway, and that putting yourself out there and risking it not being the sound of your own voice is a bit scary. But yeah, that's gone really, really well.
So tell me about Fearless Women, the latest venture in which you're, of which there have been many, but the latest venture, Fearless Women. Tell me about Fearless Women.
Well, Fearless Women's kind of come about on a sad note, really. So my agency, so I ran Promote for 26 years. We celebrated 25 years last year, and sadly didn't make it out of COVID and all that's happened. So we're very, there's 10 of us by the end, but we're very much sports-based, working with major events, participation events, etc. And I think about April, May time, we realised we weren't going to make it out the other side. I'm really happy to say that all the team have now got roles. So some have gone very different directions and different opportunities. Some have picked up some of the clients that we were working for before. Some have gone to work for some of the clients we had in the past. So the agency finished, and so Fearless Women really, I guess, is just me now following my passion for women's sport and to have an impact, to make a difference to the world of women's sport, be that profile or participation. We talked a lot about role models, mentoring, etc. So it's really an umbrella organisation, an umbrella company under which sits the podcasts, the book I think we talk about in a moment, some consultancy. So I'm supporting a couple of agencies in terms of their work around women and girls and women's sport. And also we've just launched the Women's Sport Collective, so a network for women working in the sports sector. So that could be coaches and those in academics, as well as those in PR and comms and administration, etc. So we only launched that about 10 days ago. We've had over 1,000 sign-ups already. We did a pilot in the summer with women working in the sector, about 70 women. So that sits within it too. So I guess Fearless Women is a bit of a place to house all those different things, but all focused around women's sport. That's the real clear focus.
Fantastic. So tell me, you've a book in the offing, 2021.
Yes.
Which I'm fascinated to read when the time comes. Tell me again, what's the title and what's the content? What are you going to be writing about or talking about?
I've written. The book is written. The manuscript's finished.
Written about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's finished. So the title is Game On: The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. So the book's been produced through Unbound, which is a crowdfunding publisher. So it's not self-publishing, but you get the whole book pledged for before you launch it. So that's all been, it's all paid for and done, just as it were now. But people can still make pledges. I should a little shout out. They want to go and find it at Unbound, they can still pledge. And there's various different prizes and awards and things that they can get, as well as the books and hardback copies signed, etc. And I'm really lucky that actually Vitality came on board and they have backed it as well. So they're kind of helping to support, get it out there too. So it tells the story. I guess a lot of it was my journey to understand some of the things we've talked about today, really, why women's sport is where it is, what's happened in the past that stopped it progressing, what's caused the change, what we're seeing now, and what the hope is for the future. So it's a bit of a manifesto and a rallying cry to help make change. But it's fascinating looking at the bits that have really interested me almost, is the going back in history and looking at why we are where we are today, why women's sport is where it is today, from a Victorian frailty myth that we're all so weak, we can't take part in these, sports, and our bodies will we'll become infertile, and all these horrible myths that were around women and physical activity that really some of them still perpetuate a bit today, that, in the visions of what is femininity. So all those things, it covers off lots of those different areas, as well as looking at commercial sponsorship and partnership and spectators and all the elements that are important around kind of governance. And I think men White Men in Blazers, I think is one of the titles there. So that governance of sport and how it's changing. So it's a positive, hopeful book, but it does talk a lot about, many of the issues that we're still facing in women's sport now.
How have you found the journey of writing? Because I guess in moments of the odd daydream, I sometimes reflect and think maybe there's a book in there somewhere, but it's never something I'd gotten round to. But what was the experience, if you like, of putting pen to paper?
I absolutely loved it. It's interesting. It was hard to start. So what I did first of all was went out and got it funded. So you do all the work to get the book funded, and then it's like, oh crap, I've got to write 70,000 words now. I didn't even do a dissertation at university. But actually, it was my lovely daughter Molly, who is at university, who talked to me and said, actually, what you need to do is just to do a mind map the book, and then mind map each chapter, and actually then taking that and putting that into a plan. Actually, then you've kind of almost got the beginnings of it, and then you build upon that and build upon the plan. So it was mainly weekends that I wrote. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, throughout the summer. So it's taken about 4 months or so. But actually, go ahead and do it. You should do it. Once you get into it, I really, really loved writing it and researching and talking to the people and getting stuff in. So the manuscript's now done, 72,169 words, I think. And it's gone off. It's now with a couple of expert readers. So somebody from a sports sociology background, somebody from a commercial sports background. And then on the 1st of October, it goes to the first structural editor. And then it goes to a copy editor and a proof editor. So there's a massive process now of editing those words. So I'm hoping they'll improve them, or they'll add to them as we go through this process. And then I think it's about 6 months they need from when it's actually the words are all finished and they've got the cover art agreed, etc., when it then goes out for pre-publicity and sales and to get it into bookshops and so on as well. So September 2021 is when it will be available around the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make a diary note myself, but not least, it would be great to have you back on maybe at the time. We can talk about how the experience of your first book has gone. I'd love to know a little bit more about it. So you mentioned earlier role models. I mean, from your own perspective, who do you admire? Who do you look to? Who are you inspired by?
Yeah, I've been so lucky, haven't I? Because actually I've got to talk to lots of them through the Game Changers. So I think that that's definitely been an amazing experience for me, of some of those women, like the Sally Mundys at UK Sport, and Catherine Granger and Claire Connor, just women who have done amazing things within sports organisations and within sports bodies. So, so I guess you asked that question, I'd say look back at my 41 that I was spoken to for the Game Changers, and it's probably many of them really that I do find great inspiration from.
And you, clearly you're very, very busy, but what do you do when you're not writing books, producing podcasts, and doing all these great things for women in sport? What do you do to unwind, relax? And is there any downtime in Sue Anstiss' life?
There is. There's probably more downtime now. I'm working from home than there was when I was in the office. I've got a dog that I walk 3 times a day, and I definitely didn't walk anywhere near. I'm looking back at my phone at how much I'm walking, so much more than I did when I was in the office day to day. And I swim. I do open water swimming, so through the winter and the summer, but we swim through the winter in the cold water. So that's something in the last 2 or 3 years. I came to triathlon really late in life. So I did at 46, I started doing triathlons, and I did a bit of a GB age group competing. At last I got my GB vest. I was jealous of my brother having competed internationally, but took until I was 46 for me to get mine. So I did 2 or 3 years of quite competitive triathlon, and then now it's much more about just swimming for pleasure. So regular swimming in a lake with a lovely group of friends, 3-4 times a week, and then lots of walking.
Fantastic. So if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to 20-year-old you?
I'm very, very happy where I am. So I guess it's how much would I want to change? I guess maybe it's the journey didn't need to be quite so painful in places. I think probably having more confidence. So being brave to go out and try new things and not be worried about that you'll fail or what others will think, I think is probably a key point. But not that I wouldn't give myself advice, but I'm pleased with where I've got to. So I think it is about just enjoying the journey and recognising it's what is important to you, isn't it? It's never been about money for me. So my career path, I've always wanted to have success, but success for me has been about having a lovely balance and doing the things that you love and being able to have an impact and so on. So I think my advice would be to stick with what it is that you believe. Don't get swayed by feeling the need to be more competitive or take a route that perhaps doesn't feel right to you.
So what does the future hold for Sue Anstiss?
Yeah, more of the same. It's been really exciting the last 6 months. I almost feel COVID probably got me to a place where I hoped I might be in a decade. It probably got me there a bit sooner. But I love, making an impact and being able to help other people. I think that it's shown me this last 6 months that that's really nice to be able to do, to know what you're doing is making a difference. And as I say, it's not, a lot of what we're doing. I mean, the Women's Sport Collective, we're just doing off our own back. We're not getting paid to do it at the moment, but it's a fabulous thing to do. So I guess as long as there's enough income that enables me to go off and do those fantastic things without having to make money from them, that's exciting to be able to make change and make difference. I'd like to feel that through the book and the Women's Sport Collective and the Women's Sport Trust and the things that we're doing, we will have an impact and make change. So a bit of that is about bringing people's voices together and magnifying what they're doing. So I hope to be a part, and there are many, many others out there playing their part too, but to be, one of the players making a difference or helping others to make a difference for women's sport. And all that then, it's not just about women's sport. I guess it's women's sport and in that much bigger picture, because sport reflects and magnifies all we see in society. So actually, the fact that we see women's sport equally in papers and media coverage and athletes being paid, that's the bit that gives young women and girls the confidence to know they are equal to men. So for me, it's that much bigger picture, but sport is so powerful, but it's that much bigger bit of influencing the whole of society, because we are equal. And actually, equality is good for everyone. It's good for men and for women.
So thank you. It's been fascinating. There are so many incredible things you're involved in and do. I'm utterly convinced that people, as a consequence of listening to you here, are going to want to reach out. They're going to want to find out more. Where can they find you? Where should they go?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm everywhere at Sue Anstiss. So on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And then also the Game Changers is in those places too. And fearlesswomen.co.uk is the website. So they can also find us and all the different elements of the work we're doing through the website too.
So thank you very much. It's been great to speak with you this morning. I've really enjoyed it. Appreciate your time and your input and your energy. Ladies and gentlemen, Sue Anstiss, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been fantastic.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.